Hello everyone. In this lesson, we will begin implementing live search results. So for example, if someone comes to our website and they know exactly what they're looking for, instead of clicking on one of our links, we want them to be able to use the search icon up in the top right corner of our header. Right, so if someone was interested in biology, they should be able to click this icon and then just type in the word biology. So that makes sense, but you might be wondering, what does live search results mean? What does the word live mean in this context? Well, to answer that, let me show you an example of the opposite of live search results. So in this tab, this is an empty demo separate WordPress site using the default 2017 theme. And here we see the default search box. And if I click onto that and begin typing in biology, absolutely nothing will happen until I either press enter on my keyboard or click the submit button. Now the opposite of this behavior is live search results. Live is just another way of saying real time or on the fly or in the moment. Live search results would be as soon as I'm typing in biology and maybe just a couple hundred milliseconds after I type in the final letter and then pause for a second, we would then immediately be presented with the results for that search query right about here. Or if I backspaced and typed in math, just a couple hundred milliseconds after I stopped typing, we could see the results for that search query right here, without having to press enter or submit the form, right? Because with this traditional way of searching, if I want to search for math, I actually have to submit this form. It refreshes my browser, takes me to an entirely different URL, and only then can I finally see the results for that search. Now, I don't think that traditional search results like this is terrible, and we will learn how to set this up as a fallback later on in the course. But I do think that live, real-time, on-the-fly search results can create a more engaging user experience. So that's what we're going to set up as our first preference. Right? When someone clicks this search icon in the top right header of our website, what I want to do is open up a full screen, semi-transparent overlay or light box with a text input field that the user can begin immediately typing into. And then a couple hundred milliseconds after they stop typing, we can present them with the search results in real time. So how can we make this happen? Well, let's talk about programming languages. So in this case, PHP cannot help us. Right? PHP is great at initially outputting the page that we want to load, but once the web browser has loaded the page, if we want to make any changes without completely refreshing the page, we need to use the JavaScript language. Right? JavaScript is how we can manipulate the page in real time. So right now, why don't you and I begin writing a bit of JavaScript? So let's open up our text editor, and in our theme folder, let's look within the JS or JavaScript folder, and then I want you to open up the scripts.js file. Now, before we worry about creating our live search results, why don't we first just make sure that our JavaScript file is working? So just as a test, maybe down at the very bottom of this file, why don't we create an annoying temporary alert message, so alert and then parentheses, and within it, let's say quotations, this is a JavaScript test. And then if I save the file and refresh our website, you'll notice that I do not see a pop-up message. And that's because we just edited the file named scripts.js, but WordPress is loading in the file named scripts-bundled.js. So we need to go the extra step and bundle or compile this file, so that this updated code that we just wrote will live inside the bundled file that WordPress uses. Now this extra step of bundling and compiling our JavaScript and breaking everything down into individual module files, this is completely optional and it has nothing to do with WordPress. You don't have to set up your JavaScript like this. I'm doing things this way because I want you to gain as many valuable skills as possible, and writing modular JavaScript like this is very important to a lot of employers and dev teams. But I do want to stress that you do not need to use my JavaScript setup if you really don't want to. if you would rather write all of your JavaScript for the entire website in the one file that WordPress is loading, that's a-okay. You might not stay as organized if you do things that way, but you can avoid the whole process of needing to compile or bundle your JavaScript. Okay, but having said that, this is the way we're going to be doing things in the course, because I feel the pros outweigh the cons, and also just because this is the industry standard. So the question now is, how do we bundle up our JavaScript? Well, we've already done it a few times in the course, but let's review again. We begin by jumping over to a command line, and be sure to cd for change directory into the folder where your WordPress files live, right? So in my case, that's Fictional University, and this folder where these 4 important files live, the Webpack config, settings.js, package.json, and gulp-file.js. Okay, and once your command line is pointing towards the folder where these files live, then you can either run gulp scripts to perform a one-time bundle or compile of your JavaScript, or if instead you run gulp watch, that will spin up the local preview proxy server of your website, and more importantly, it will watch your JavaScript file for any saved changes. Right, so back in our scripts file where we wrote this is a JavaScript test message, if I save this file again, you can see the command line automatically starts bundling up the file for me. Right, so back in our text editor, that command that we just ran uses a popular tool named Webpack, and it bundles up all of these individual files that we listed into a single file, a file named scripts-bundled. So if you opened up the bundled file, you would see that it's just this huge, difficult to read for us as humans, but easy to read for a web browser. So now if we go back to our website and refresh, we do indeed see the annoying alert pop-up that says this is a JavaScript test. Okay, so at this point we've got our JavaScript game up and rolling. Now back in our text editor, we don't actually want to alert out that test message, so let's delete that. And instead, why don't we learn how to create a brand new separate module file dedicated to our live search results. So let's create a new file in this modules subfolder that lives inside our JS folder. So inside this modules folder, let me create a new file. The name of this file does not matter, but just to make sense, why don't I name it search.js? And in this course, we are going to be writing object-oriented JavaScript. Again, this is optional. You don't have to write object-oriented code. This has nothing to do with WordPress. It's just my own personal preference. But it's a very popular way of doing things in the professional dev world. And I think that you learning how to write object-oriented modular code is only going to help your career. Okay, so let's begin by creating a class named Search. So class, and then the name of our class. You could name it whatever you want. Let's go with search. Okay, and then we add in some curly brackets. And then in JavaScript, whenever we create a class, we want to be sure to include a constructor function. So we just type out constructor. It's a special reserved word in JavaScript. And then parentheses, curly brackets. Okay, and then any code that we place within the constructor function will be executed as soon as we create an object using our class or blueprint. Remember, a class is just a recyclable blueprint that we can use to create multiple objects using this recipe. Now, instead of worrying about actually building the live search results functionality right in this moment, instead, just as a quick example and test, within our constructor function, why don't we alert a pop-up message that says, hello, I am a search. All right, and let's pretend that we are now done creating our class. And now we want to be able to import and use it within our main scripts file. So back in our search.js file, down at the very bottom of this file, we can just say export default and then the name of the class, search, and this line of code will allow us to import this file into our main scripts file. So check this out. Let's go ahead and save this file, and then back in our main scripts file, in this section of code, why don't we import in that new search module? So new line, let's say import search from, and then we just provide a path that points towards the new search file. So we've got single quotes, and we'll say dot / to look inside the current folder, right? So the scripts file lives right here, and then we just want to look inside this subfolder named modules. So let's say modules, look inside that folder, and the name of the file is search. You don't need to include the .js, we just need the actual file name, search. All right, and now that we've imported that file and class, we can actually use it to create a new object. So down here, let's add a new line, and let's create a variable and name it magical search. The name doesn't matter, I'm just making up a temporary name. And let's set it to equal a new instance of our search class, right? A class is just a blueprint that you can use to create new instances or new objects. Now, as soon as I save this file, our command line will automatically rebundle up our JavaScript, and we can see that our preview proxy server automatically refreshed and says, hello, I am a search. Let's click OK. Now, back in our text editor, we created one object named magical search, but remember, classes can be reused. So we could create another variable or another object and name it amazing search, and also tell it to equal a new instance of the search class. And if we save this, I think you can imagine what will happen. We see one pop-up, hello, I am a search, and if I click OK, we see a second pop-up, hello, I am a search. So the idea here is that we create a reusable blueprint or class, and it gets to live in its own neat, organized, separate file. And then once we import that file, we can use it as many times as we want to create different objects or variables. Now, in reality, in this instance for our website, we don't need multiple search objects. We are only going to have one single search object. I only did this to remind you what a class is, right? A class is a potentially reusable blueprint. The code that lives within a class doesn't actually get executed until you create an object that uses that class as a blueprint. Okay, so let me go ahead and delete the second search. And then let me rename the first search to just simply search. The naming doesn't matter, but this will look a bit cleaner for us. Let's go ahead and save that. Okay, so now we're just back to the one pop-up. And really quick, if you are not using our modular setup, meaning you're not splitting your JavaScript up into a main file and then a module file, you might be wondering how you can leverage classes like this. Well, let me walk you through it. So if you are indeed following along and using my separate file modular pattern, you can ignore the next minute or two. But if you want to skip the whole modular bundling step, and you just want one big JavaScript file with all of your code in it, you don't need this export line. So you could delete that, or I'm going to comment it out. And instead, you can just go ahead and create a variable, amazing search equals new instance of search class. Right? You can indeed do all of this in a single file like we see here. In modern web browsers, this code will work just fine. You create your class, and then you can create objects that leverage the class. And in that case, you wouldn't need to bundle up or compile the file. You could literally just load this file in the web browser. So you could go into the WordPress functions.php file, and instead of loading in the scripts-bundled file, you could just load this search file that lives inside the modules folder. Okay, now having said that, I'm going to delete this line and then uncomment this because I am indeed going to use the modular setup where each class lives in its own individual file. And I strongly encourage you to follow along with me. Now that's actually going to bring this lesson to a close. Now that we are all on the same page and we've got our JavaScript rolling, in our next lesson, we will actually begin writing out the code to power live search results. This should be a lot of fun. There's the potential to learn a lot about JavaScript. So let's keep things rolling, and I will see you in the next lesson.